So I was watching an episode of the 2019 National Geographic miniseries Hot Zone with a friend of mine. And the series focuses on an outbreak of the Ebola virus in Virginia in the United States in 1989. But it also features a second narrative that takes place during the first outbreak of Ebola in 1976, where characters working for the WHO travel between Sudan and Zaire, attempting to identify and study this new and horrifying virus. And during one of these scenes, my friend asked me if that's similar to what medical anthropologists do, as though medical anthropologists did the same work as epidemiologists, diagnosing and finding cures for diseases. But the question made sense. Visually, the 1976 scenes are evocative of a lot of the imagery or iconography of early ethnography. European and North American researchers in the field, working in African communities, speaking in African languages, and trying to understand local cultural responses to things like disease. There's even a bit where one of the characters explains the cultural perception of the link between disease and witchcraft in a way that's straight out of Evans Pritchard's Witchcraft, Oracles, and Magic. She says,
"They know it's a virus and illness that makes them sick, hence the bleach. What makes it spiritual is why it targets a specific person. That's where beliefs, witchcraft, faith comes in."
Of course, the protagonists in the Hot Zone aren't medical anthropologists exactly. They're epidemiologists, virologists, aid workers, and military personnel. But some types of medical anthropology do actually fit into that environment pretty well. And that raises a question that I'd like to talk about in this episode of Off the Shelf. What is medical anthropology, and what do medical anthropologists do?
Oh, what I'm trying to tell you, I'm not your enemy, I'm a scientist.
You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
In a nutshell, medical anthropology is the study of human health and disease, as well as different cultural and historical approaches to healthcare and biocultural adaptation. And what people mean when they say biocultural adaptation is the study of the relationship between human biology and culture, and the role that that relationship plays in our ability to respond to the social and physical challenges posed by different kinds of disease. Traditionally, medical anthropology is broken up into three subdisciplines: medical ecology, ethnomedicine, and applied medical anthropology. The first of these, medical ecology, focuses on the ecological aspects of disease, as well as different cultural reactions to the environmental phenomena that influence the spread of pathogens. In other words, specialists in medical ecology are interested in how the environment influences human health and how different cultures adapt to those ecological factors. One of the dominant perspectives in ecological health literature, as Anne McElroy writes, is that the evolution of disease parallels human biological and cultural evolution. For example, the medical and ecological risks faced by a society of hunter-gatherers are totally different from those of early industrial societies. So medical ecology also examines the historical epidemiological profile of different pathogens and how we've responded to them in different historical periods. The second subdiscipline is ethnomedicine, which is the study of different culture-specific conceptualizations of disease and healthcare. In the past, ethnomedical researchers often studied the medical practices and beliefs of societies without access to Western medicine or cultures where traditional pre-modern medical practices were still used. But the field is increasingly reflexive, and contemporary ethnomedical specialists also study the perception of disease, illness, and well-being in developed societies as well. One of the core concepts that informs ethnomedical research is that different people within a society adopt different explanatory models for the spread of disease. And explanatory models, or EMs for short, are culturally informed explanations for how a disease spreads, how a disease is diagnosed, and how it should be treated. So in Hot Zone, for example, when the epidemiologists encounter local explanations for the spread of Ebola, where people attempt to explain to the doctors that the disease was caused by witchcraft or sent as a punishment by God, the show is representing different explanatory models from those that we encounter among the medical experts working for the WHO. And in Hot Zone, Grace Gummer's character, who's an aid worker named Melinda Danport, is really the closest thing that we have to a medical anthropologist and specialist in ethnomedicine. She spends a lot of time contextualizing local beliefs for the epidemiologists, and also translating local languages and dialects into English so the other characters can do their work. The third subdiscipline in medical anthropology is applied medical anthropology, which is a way of saying that some medical anthropologists use their ethnographic expertise as a supplement to actual medical healthcare work or scientific research in epidemiology. Applied medical anthropologists might work, for example, as public health consultants in the field or in hospitals and clinics, collecting stats or organizing clinical laboratory work. It's a very eclectic and interdisciplinary field that mixes qualitative and quantitative methods. In conclusion, medical anthropology as a whole is a multidisciplinary field that focuses on different historical and cultural conceptualizations of disease and healthcare. It often involves significant ethnographic components, but in applied medical anthropology, researchers sometimes also specialize as medical specialists in their own right. And to simplify the complexity of the field, we tend to use those three subdisciplines, medical ecology, ethnomedicine, and applied medical anthropology, as a kind of shorthand to explain the different types of research that medical anthropologists do. If you found that helpful, please do like and subscribe. We're just getting the channel started, but I'm planning to continue putting up a lot of content in the future. In the meantime, be safe. We love you.
No!
So how do biological and cultural factors shape our bodily experiences? Anthropologists believe that our biology works with culture to make us who we are. So rather than think of ourselves as purely biological or purely cultural, we should instead think of ourselves as biocultural beings. Biocultural, the complex intersections of biological, psychological, and cultural processes. So, what is health? And how does culture shape our ideas of health and illness? Well, back to the definition of health. It is the absence of disease and infirmity, as well as the presence of physical, mental, and social well-being. So are disease, illness, and sickness the same? Well, in answer to the question, are they all the same? Not quite. In assessing how disease and health conditions affect specific populations and how specific cultural groups diagnose, manage, and treat health-related problems, medical anthropologists have found it useful to distinguish between disease, illness, sickness, and then the term malady. Disease is a purely physiological condition of being sick, and this is determined by a physician. Illness is the psychological and social experience a patient has of a disease. Sickness is the individual's public expression of illness and disease, and also the social expectations as to how one is to respond and behave. And then malady is a term that encompasses disease, illness, and sickness. A disease may be caused genetically or through infection by bacteria, a virus, or parasites, but they are the same regardless of location or cultural context. Illness can be more than a biological disease. Diseases can be observed, measured, and treated by sufferers and healers. But culture gives meaning to disease, shaping the human experience of illness, pain, suffering, dying, and death. Illness is the individual's experience of being unwell. It includes the way that a person feels about it, talks about it, thinks about it, and experiences it within a particular cultural context. Sickness refers to the individual's expression of illness and death. You may not have thought about it, but there are social expectations on how we should behave and respond and how others respond when we're sick. We're going to talk more about the sick role, but the sick role in American culture is that there's a clear wish to get well, to cooperate with medical experts, and we'll talk about the dealing with medical experts, everything from doctors to parents. The explanatory model of illness is an explanation of what is happening to a patient's body by the patient's family, or by a healthcare practitioner. And each one may have a different model of what is happening. You're not sick. Has anyone ever questioned if you are sick or not? So what do we mean further by health and illness? Concepts like health and illness do not suggest any objective measure of when we have health and when it has left us. The ambiguity between health and illness stems from, first, the subjectivity of illness, which is how people perceive and experience their condition on a personal level. And when we talked earlier about whom we should call, usually the number one answer is Dr. Mom. And we know that there are certain things that Dr. Mom expects when it comes to her patients, one including this remain in bed when staying home from school. Calling in sick. How many of you have had the experience of calling in sick, and when you do, you try to make yourself sound worse than you maybe actually feel, just so that your boss, your employer, will get the story, will buy your story, and believe that you are in fact sick. So let's talk some more about the sick role. The sick role is the culturally defined agreement between patients and family members to acknowledge that a patient is legitimately sick, which involves certain responsibilities and behaviors that caregivers expect of the sick. The sick role. It works well for acute diseases like measles, bad colds, and chickenpox, when patients are expected to get better and to help in the care by following medical advice. To meet these expectations, patients are often considered exempt from participating in ordinary social activities, and generally, they're not blamed for causing their own sickness. Compare the sick role for an acute infection, however, with that of a chronic condition like diabetes, chronic shortness of breath, or severe arthritis. Let's talk about some other things. Usually when we talk about healthcare in the West, we think about things like doctors, dentist chairs, hospitals, medicines, technology, but not the point of entry for healthcare in most places in the world, or even in other Western countries. Most people, before turning to professionals, apply their own personal knowledge, their own strategies handed down within families and communities. And a couple of ways. First is ethnomedicine, which is local health systems rooted in culturally specific norms and values. The early study of ethnomedicine focused on non-Western techniques and natural healing strategies such as herbs, teas, massage, the reliance on religious ritual, and the roles of locally trained healers such as shamans, spirit mediums, priests, and priestesses as healthcare professionals. Ethnopharmacology was documenting and describing natural substances used in healing remedies and practices, came into being as researchers documented local use of natural substances such as herbs, powders, teas, and animal products in healing remedies and practices. Medical pluralism occurs when competing ethnomedical traditions coexist and form distinct health subcultures with unique beliefs, practices, and organizations. In this picture, It's an apothecary in a Nanjing hospital in China, where this person is preparing a treatment grounded in traditional Chinese medicine or TCM. Contemporary medical facilities sometimes offer biomedical practice and ethnomedicine together in one setting. In many contemporary societies, ethnomedical systems coexist with and frequently incorporate biomedicine. Biomedicine is privileged as the dominant healthcare system in the United States, but in many metropolitan areas, people can also consult practitioners of Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, homeopathic medicine, chiropractic medicine, and other ethnomedicinal systems from around the world. Examples of medical pluralism are fairly common in contemporary Western society. For example, yoga as a treatment for stress and as a form of physical and mental therapy, essential oils derived from traditional medicine to enhance health, and countless others. So let's take a look at how healing happens. We first can look at the power of non-medical healing. In this photo, this is by the author of one of the well-known Intro to Cultural Anthropology texts, the Professor Robert L. Welch. And when he was studying the Nigerian people, he found himself suffering a leg injury, and a healer removes a magical packet from the man's leg by reciting magical words and rubbing magical leaves on his body and then sucking to relieve the pain in his leg. And Welsh reports that after this treatment, things went very well for him. We can talk about clinical therapeutic processes, which refers to healing processes that involve the use of medicines that have some active ingredient that is assumed to address either the cause or the symptom of a disorder. There are also symbolic therapeutic processes, which refers to healing processes that restructure the meanings of the symbols surrounding the illness, particularly during a ritual. And then there's the social support therapeutic processes, which refers to healing processes that involve a patient's social networks, especially close family members and friends who typically surround a patient during an illness. And finally, persuasion, or the placebo effect. The placebo effect refers to healing processes that work by persuading a patient that they've been given a powerful medicine, even though the medicine has no active medicinal ingredient. And this concludes our section on medical anthropology.